Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English. This is segment 3 of episode 39. Earlier this episode, we saw that the most popular pets are cats and dogs, and they are all mammals, or both of them, I should say, are mammals. It's some of these mammal traits that makes them such great pets, but there's a dark side to being a mammal. When I was growing up, I was also told about dogs having a disease called rabies. This disease is a serious public health threat. Rabies is the subject of a TV program entitled Animals Impacting Our Health, produced by Bob Schopp here at RVTV. We're going to share with you part of that program. To help you understand what you hear, I'll take some time to tell you some of the words you'll hear and what they mean. The word bat is often used. A bat is a mammal that can fly. In Spanish, we call them murciélagos. Another word is fox, a medium-sized mammal known as a zorro in the Spanish-speaking world. Of course, by now, you know the word dog, and I just told you about the disease we'll discuss, the word rabies. Prepared with that information, let's see how much you understand of this segment of animals impacting our health.
Welcome to Animals Impacting Our Health, a series of interviews that will provide the public in the Rogue Valley with a better understanding of the importance of keeping pets healthy and vaccinated through regular checkups with their primary care veterinarian. Also, introduce the public to the broad impact of infectious disease in our pets, food animals, and the local community in Oregon. In addition to elevating and expanding the public's perception of the profession of veterinary medicine through the introduction of various levels of state and local veterinarians and regulation agencies. Animals Impacting Our Health presents a 3-part interview with Dr. Emilio DeBest discussing rabies, the threat, the truth, and the treatment. Dr. DeBest is the state public health veterinarian for the state of Oregon, and his emphasis is in infectious and zoonotic diseases. Well, welcome to part 2 of Rabies, the Truth, of our series called Animals Impacting Our Health with our special guest, Dr. Emilio DeBest. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for anybody who had missed the first show, could you do a little review of what is rabies and how it impacts us?
Sure. So rabies is it's a disease that causes brain disease. So the virus itself actually goes into the brain and causes severe damage of the brain. The reason why it is an important disease is because people throughout the world do die of rabies at the tune of about 55,000 people a year. In the United States, we only have about 3, maybe 2 to 4 people a year, and that is because of the good medical care that we have in this country. But it is a significant disease of not only throughout the world, but in the United States as well.
And a little review on how is it spread?
So most people get infected with rabies through animal bites. Mm-hmm. So all warm-blooded animals can actually carry rabies. In countries such as Mexico or China or India, dogs are the primary carriers of the disease. In the United States, we have other animals such as raccoons, skunks, and bats.
Okay, and we're going to show some maps of first the world, and then the United States, and then specifically for Oregon. And we'd like to talk about the incidence of rabies in the world and specifically in Oregon.
Yes. So we have the first slide is about what is going on with rabies throughout the world. And as you can see, most of the continents in the world have rabies. So a lot of it, the map actually is a good indication of what you need to be aware of when you travel throughout the world and the possibilities of being exposed to rabies. As you can see, both the United States, Central and South America are considered to be a fairly significant source of rabies, as well as countries in Asia and in Africa.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. So let's move on to the United States and the incidence of rabies in the United States.
Yeah, in the United States, we have a little bit of a different situation. As you can see, the east side of the United States has raccoon rabies. And that has been a fairly significant problem for the last 15 to 20 years when raccoon rabies became a problem, and it actually has spread throughout the East Coast, and they're trying very hard to contain the disease. In the central part of the United States, skunk lead the way in terms of the primary animals creating a source of rabies for human exposure, and some foxes in central and southern Texas. And then on the West Coast, skunks in some parts of California can actually are of concern in regards to rabies transmission. What this map is not telling us is that throughout the United States, bats are the primary carriers of the disease. So this map is basically giving us the information as to what kind of terrestrial animals or animals on land actually carry or can carry the disease. And bats are the #1 carriers in the United States as well.
Where did rabies come from?
Rabies comes from, the source of rabies is obviously unknown, but it's actually a disease that has been maintained in the population of bats throughout the world as well as other animals. So the disease actually has what we call a reservoir, meaning an animal that actually carries the disease and passes it on to another animal that maintains that animal within the environment and within population of animals. So for example, bats in the United States are considered to be the reservoir for rabies, at least on the West Coast where we are, because they are the primary source of rabies.
So how long has it been around then?
It's been around for thousands of years.
Thousands of years.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. So let's go back, let's go to Oregon and look what's been going on since, what are we looking at, 2010?
2010.
2010, okay.
So we talked about rabies in the United States, and the primary animal is the bat. So bats are considered to be our primary source of rabies in the United States, on the West Coast, and definitely in Oregon. In 2010, we had a very interesting situation in which in Josephine County, we actually found a goat that tested positive for rabies. And when that goat tested positive for rabies, the samples were actually sent to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to determine what kind of rabies that would have been. And we quickly learned that that goat was infected through a bat. So a bat that had rabies actually infected the goat and created that problem. Since then, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Health Division and the County Health Department decided to do a little bit more of a surveillance process by which we collected animals that were ill, terrestrial animals that were ill, and we did find a number of foxes positive for rabies in that area as well. Again, those samples were sent to the CDC, and those foxes came back as bat rabies. So in Oregon, bat rabies continues to be the primary problem. That can actually affect not only humans, but other animals.
And I would imagine it would be a concern if one goat was discovered with rabies, that there would be others.
Correct. And the herd of goats, or where that goat came from, we actually had to quarantine that herd to make sure that no other animals actually came down with rabies. And fortunately, no other goat came down with rabies.
You breathed a sigh of relief then.
A little bit, yes.
So is it like one bat that will carry it? where it bit one goat and then maybe a fox, or these? Can you tell how many number of bats are carrying rabies?
Correct. So we look at the population of bats in the United States, and there's an assessment, or there's a perception that about 0.5% of the bats in the United States can actually carry rabies. So it's a very, very small percentage. In Oregon, about 10% of the bats that we test, and those are bats that have actually exposed or have bitten humans or animals, actually carry rabies. So it's a little bit of a difference. 0.5% if those bats in nature, 10% of those are those bats that we test for rabies because they have exposed either a human or an animal.
Okay. So what was the incident rating of rabies in Oregon in 2010?
In 2010, it was about 10% of the bats tested positive for rabies.
Okay.
Yes.
What about humans?
So the last human case in Oregon was actually in 1989. In Oregon was in 1989, and it happened to be a Mexican national who came to Oregon to work and develop rabies after being bitten by a Mexican dog.
Okay.
So we haven't had any cases within the state or of cases that of humans that have contracted the infection within the state.
So it's no longer just dogs carrying the disease in the United States. That doesn't happen anymore. Yet it persists in bats and animals bitten by them, like goats, in the case in Oregon. Now, it's still in dogs in Mexico and parts of Asia. So rabies is still very much with us in the world. Visit my website, letscreate.org, for a link to the entire program, Animals Impacting Our Health, produced by Bob Schopp. You can also watch all of our episodes of Ramping Up Your English at the same website, along with homework and instructional material. You can watch and download today's program at archive.org/details/RogueTV. Watch Ramping Up Your English on Ashland Home Network, Channel 15, or on Channel 182 on Charter Cable. That's Charter Cable in Southern Oregon. Program times are 8 a.m. on Mondays and 7:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Showtimes and channels may vary in other areas. I want to thank producer Bob Schopp for the use of this program, Animals Impacting Our Health. I want to thank my technical crew for their great service, and I want to thank you, our viewers. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/RogueTV. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.